record. And I'm going to shut this part down so we can see. Okay, so we've got recording. Okay. Prayers. First of all, we have Shirley. We have a new person here, and it's her birthday tomorrow. And so happy birthday.
Happy birthday to
And
you.
I think she says it's okay
Happy
to say
birthday
she's 94 tomorrow, you guys.
No, happy birthday, dear Shirley. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Gene, I knew a lot about you. I did not know you were a crooner. That was pretty good. They say make a joyful noise unto the Lord, and that exempts me.
Me too. Yeah. Some Thanksgivings for Shirley's birthday. Gina isn't here this morning, but she still has family issues, but things went really well this week. So prayers of Thanksgiving for that situation. And Cindy wrote a prayer request that, first of all, we've been praying. Just mess this up just a sec. Lots of messages. Just a sec.
Make a bigger screen.
Hey, while you're doing that, I want to tell you I had a whole group of people from Uganda come visit.
All right, Lisa, can you turn that mic on for Lisa?
Okay.
Because there's a story here.
Oh, I was going to tell you, I had a whole group. This is very impromptu. Had a whole group of kids, a kids choir from Uganda, come and visit. It's a long story, but anyway, Louise and Anita and Stan helped me welcome them, and that was so good because I was like, what am I going to do? And it was beautiful. There was like 20 in the group, and the pastor I know, we've kind of been talking for a couple of years, but for them to come visit me was amazing. And they sang and visited, and what else did they do, Louise?
They did a tour. They sang at the Daily Grind and at the Paradise Ski where
It was a beautiful thing.
That's as close as it's going to focus.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, there's the
I love it when people actually follow through and doing stuff like that. That's so neat.
Cindy, Jack has a couple of prayer requests. First of all, we've been praying for Robert, and he passed away this week. He was the one who had stem cell transplant, passed away this week. But his wife Carol said thank you for our group, for our continued prayers along the way. Keep Carol and their family in your prayers as they deal with Robert's death. Cindy also asked us to pray for John. John, those of you who know Cindy, her son is Macaulay. And John is Macaulay's girlfriend's dad, and he's extremely serious in the San Antonio Methodist Hospital. He was life flighted there, and pray that he knows that his daughter is there. So that does not sound good.
It does not.
And the other prayers for the week, on Scott's and My Heart, just a lot of people have reached out to us that I would say the prayer is for peace, that people feel a sense of peace and that God is with them.
Yeah, we've had a lot of things lead to that idea this week. So the last couple of weeks, God, we come to you recognizing that you're the creator of the universe we live in, that we owe everything to you, and we're grateful, we're thankful for the fact that you reach out to us to bring humanity to you. We have these ones we mentioned by name because they're seeking that peace, because they have these problems, and we hurt when they hurt. We ask that you be with them, the family of the one who's lost a husband and father. It's always difficult on the ones that are still here. Be with them. Cheryl is still dealing with her health issues. God, be with her. And Kelly, buried under snow and in constant pain. You know, I understand that from what I went through. Be with her. Let her feel your presence. We ask for peace because we see around us so much unrest, so much difficulty. And for each one of us, the entire world clearly doesn't feel your peace, but we can. Help us to be open to that, to recognize your hand and your presence. And we pray for wisdom as we go through these lessons. Amen.
Okay, we are in week 6 of Genesis, and we are going to start off in Genesis 7. But before we do that, we always have a side thing. And so the question is, why do we have these scriptures?
Yeah. Why do we have scriptures? How did they get here? And if anybody wants to chime in, if you understand the question, I mean, what are we doing with this book, and how did it get to us? How was it created? Gene, you have any thoughts?
I don't know how it was created. I think there's an innate searching button for men in this earth, that there is somebody greater than we are, if you believe. And because of that, we want to backtrack to find out as much as we can so that we can be on the right track to get back again.
I would suggest there's somebody greater than us, whether we believe or not. That's part of what I see as wrong in this world, is that people believe there's nothing greater than them. Anyone else? Anybody at home? You want to chime in? No? So let me try and explain what I'm getting at. There are really only 2 options on how they get to us. Either some humans decided to sit down and write a book of human wisdom and use some fictional God as a backdrop, or a real God, but they sat down and wrote their thoughts to give to us. Or these scriptures are inspired because there are things God wants us to know. And I subscribe to the second. They're written by humans, absolutely. And in words, because we only have words, and words sometimes betray us, in terms of what they understand. But if you really stay diligent with the idea that God wants us to know some things, and you look, those things are always there. And we can examine things that we think are discrepancies. A lot of the time they're not. It's because the people teaching are lazy. And I ran across one of those. I won't get into details this week, but there's a guy with a PhD in Christian origins, and he's trying to debunk the scriptures. But he talks about this discrepancy, and I had no choice. I mean, I had to school him on this because he intentionally leaves out some really important words, and you can't get around words. They have meaning. So my point is this: you know that we resisted revelation for a long time, not because we're scared of it, but because of what has been done with it, to the point that people have to unlearn some things that they've been told. Genesis is the bookend. And in some ways, I dreaded portions of Genesis more than Revelation. And the idea, last week we talked about the flood. We can go into great detail. I mean, I know all the arguments about young Earth. The Earth is only 6,000 years old, and I know them all. I've been through them with people. But within that, we see that we're told Noah walked with God. The other stuff is by far the least important part of Genesis. about was the flood global, was it regional, was, all those things. What really stands out to me is that Noah walked with God, and we see that the people that utterly reject God, Yahweh, there's a consequence. And whether that consequence is a flood, I'm not saying every flood is a consequence, but there's a consequence in our lives. There's a consequence in the way we live. And we see it all around us, that especially now young people are taught there is no God and there is nothing greater than you in this universe. So Gene, as you often step right into some of the things that I kind of plan to say today, this idea. And so when we read Genesis, I have to be careful. I have had people literally leave angry over things in time, sometimes because I'm too literal, and sometimes because I'm not literal enough. And what I'm trying to tell you, and in really explicit terms, is that the things God wants us to know are there. Let's focus on trying to see what those are. Noah walked with God. We're told that David was a man after God's own heart. And I mentioned last week, I have been often just in awe of the idea of being able for someone to say, you walked with God.
I was telling Scott that when we were studying, I said, we always, at funerals, oftentimes they say in the New Testament, what is the expression that you live? Sorry,
Help me.
Help
me help you.
That you've lived a good life.
Oh yeah, now you did it.
Sorry. A good and faithful servant.
Oh yeah, well done, thou good and faithful servant. We see through the Old Testament, especially when we start getting into the law, we see that the human nature of trying to control, dominate, I guess control. When we talked about husband and wife, started out as Ish and Isha, man and woman. And then later under the law, when they're trying to say, well, if you go into battle and you win, and there's a woman there and you think she looks good, you can take her as a wife. But the word suddenly shifts from Isha, from woman, to Baal, which is Baal, which is owner. You can own her. And suddenly they begin trying to justify these things. In the law, they begin to talk about if you have a Hebrew slave, that you can keep them for 6 years, but you have to let them go after the 7th year. They're finding ways to justify doing things they were never supposed to do. We are not supposed to do. And this desire to control, dominate is the exact opposite. The fact that it's in the scriptures does not make it a roadmap for us. There are people who say we still have to live by the law. We may be forgiven by grace, but we still have to follow the law. Well, no, not only we don't, Jesus comes and says, knock it off. They want to control him and them. And they catch his disciples doing this and eating grain on the Sabbath. And they want to make them, we want to control this. And he said, no, the Sabbath is made for men. Jesus comes and says, this stuff that you see, these are examples. Did I say man was made for the Sabbath? I got to look there. The Sabbath is made for man. The stuff we'll see in the Old Testament, in the law, it's factual in that it is in fact how they lived. It is history, but we learn that it shows us at times how not to live. It's the opposite of who we're supposed to be. And when Jesus comes, the Messiah shows up, he turns everything upside down. He says, you guys have taken what was good and you've turned it into something ugly, something that is the opposite of what God wants for you. So,
and I guess that's the summation when we were talking about this, is that if we take Genesis as believers, we need to watch the way we understand Genesis, because we believe that we're here for a purpose and that God reaches out to bring people to him. And if we,
Thank you. And you're putting me back on that last track. We have a purpose here. Would you agree with that? Part of that purpose, we see that God reaches out to humanity. God draws people to him. That's also part of our purpose. And when we take the scriptures and use them and abuse them, like this PhD guy this week, and you beat people over the head with things, not knowing really what you're talking about at times, it does the opposite. It causes people to say, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to believe that. And I think that is maybe the worst thing that has been done by organized Christianity over the last 2,000 years. And so when I talk about Genesis, I think I managed to offend just about everybody. It's either too literal or not literal enough. Let's avoid that if we can.
and realize that when we study the scriptures, what are the two things? We come up with two things, I'm sure there's more, but the two things that we see in the story of Noah, there is a consequence for rejecting God, and just that sentence that Noah walked with God. And wouldn't that be a wonderful thing for us to hear at the pearly gates when it was our time that we walked with God?
Well done, good and faithful servant. And we see just before the story of Noah, this description of these Nephilim, these people who just abuse. They take women that they see just because they want to. And the contrast between them and Noah walked with God is one of the things we need to see.
Okay,
but
yes,
Scott,
yeah.
in that Genesis 6, it starts off with Noah found favor with God.
Yes,
A couple of sentences later, he says Noah walked with God.
right.
I don't think that can happen without the first part.
Well,
God.
clearly, yeah.
So if we miss that insertion of faith, now we're just talking about a 6'2" guy walking around for 600 years and we got nothing.
Well, I don't think walk with means just that God's there and he happens to be walking. I mean, those two things amount to one unit, but it's a point well made. I would really like to learn all the time when it says Noah walked with God, that David is a man after God's own heart. I want to learn how to be that. That's what we're being told. If we believe that the scriptures are inspired to humans, that God has things he wants to tell us. And you say, well, why didn't he just invent the TV early and give us a weekly update? I actually have some thoughts on that we're not going to get into. But the point is, he speaks through humans. And he never, ever, there's no evidence of God saying, you'll do this or else. We have free will. How is it as humans, we think we have the right to do what God doesn't do to other humans? Yes? That's what we want to focus on. Genesis is going to have these quirky things until we reach 12. And then all of a sudden, the mysteries in creation settle in, and suddenly we see glaringly the path that leads us to the Messiah and the path that leads us to Revelation when he finally sets everything right. Then it becomes clear that this book is that story from beginning to end. The first 11 chapters, hey, there's going to be some weird stuff. Let's be patient.
Chapter 7, verse 6 is where we left off. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came from the earth. And Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. The clean and unclean animals, the birds, and everything that crawls along the ground came to Noah to enter the ark, 2 by 2, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And after 7 days, the flood waters came upon the earth in In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, all the fountains of the great deep burst forward, and the floodgates of heaven were opened, and the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So you wanted to point out a couple of things on this. One of them was the animals came to Noah.
Do I dare diverge
Yeah,
into some of this stuff?
Just a second.
Smart animals.
Well, no, but we said last week, the defense will stipulate God can do anything. Two by two says we're getting male and female. It says they're coming in male and female pairs. It's just not, I don't think, any more complicated than that. The idea that we know there are different animals in Australia, the young Earth people actually realized they kind of have a problem. So they say that the continents were all together and they broke apart during the flood. So in the early part of this, the animals down in what we call Australia, it was all one landmass, and God sent them and they walked up. And then people said, well, okay, now that the continents have split apart in 140 days, by the way, the continents floated apart. How did the animals get from Noah back to Australia? And they say they floated on giant logs. I have no answer for that. I mean, okay, I don't want to argue about those parts.
But I'll tell you, those people who do argue do more harm than good.
They do. Even if that's factual, start with the fact that there is a life more abundant. That's something people respond to. You beat them over the head with animals floating to Australia on giant logs. I don't know. It does harm. But the animals come. Do they go out and round them up? Do the animals come? I don't know. I don't even care. 2 by 2 says male and female to repopulate after this event.
The other sentence that we were going to just touch upon, and the rain fell upon the earth. There's a whole group of people who believes that there was never rain until this time, and this was the first one. And like they act like that's important one way or the other.
And they say that the water came up out of underneath stores. John Paul, do I have permission? Can I talk about last week? There are people, scientists, and they come out with these articles that say there is an entire ocean under the crust of the earth that's big enough to flood the entire earth, much deeper than our oceans. And they tell this, and when I say it does more harm than good, it confuses people because these are PhD scientists. What they don't tell, and fortunately I do have the scientific background, it's not water that's under there. There's a huge amount, they're called hydroxyl radicals. Water is H2O, and what's underground is HO. It's not liquid water, it's actually wrapped up in in minerals. If you punched a hole, no water comes out. But they call it water. They say because it's HO, it could become H2O, but it's not. And it confuses people. There is not enough water underground for this to happen. So Genesis says that water, the springs burst forth, but it also says that the heavens opened up and it rained. And there are people who insist it had never rained until this. I don't know. You weren't there. I wasn't there. Don't know. Don't care. I say these things in case you ever run into somebody who tells you these stories. Don't let it shake your faith. Don't let it make you start asking questions that are just absolutely meaningless. Yes, James.
So what do you think the point of that writing is, this writing here in Genesis?
I believe a flood happened. Absolutely, unequivocally, a great flood happened. I do. I believe that, as John Paul pointed out, there are stories about it from all over the world. Was it big enough to cover the entire globe 2 miles deep? More than 2 miles deep? I don't know.
My point is this writing from the very beginning, Genesis here, saying, look, you're not going to understand all of this. I'm going to write it the way you need to write it so that you're put into a shoe going to God. If you have the faith, you're gonna get there. If you don't, no science is gonna get you there.
you know, that's not bad. I think that some of this understanding down to, we're not meant to understand down to the finest detail. What is being told, though, if you really look, and if you want, let me speculate just a little bit. God dealt with humanity at the time of what we call Adam and Eve. There's a plan going into place. And there are things that I think are different during this time. We have an account of people living much longer. Are they the ones, the descendants that come from Eden? I think so. But the point is, things had devolved to the point that God said, I'm going to make an adjustment. And I think there's a flood. But what you're asking, now I think about it, you're saying, what's the point of telling us things that we can't verify? There's a whole bunch of stuff we can't verify. This week in physics, they came out with a new theory that says the universe evolves and the laws of physics change. They sort of, in fact, some people call it natural selection. And so gravity doesn't behave the way it used to. And that's the way they explain the fact that their theories, now that they have more data, don't hold water. No pun intended. Their theories cannot explain what they observe. Well, we're sort of in that boat. We read this and we go, I don't know. Well, the scientists, the best scientists in the world, don't know. And they've come out with a theory that said, well, the reason why all of our formulas don't match what we observe is because early on, gravity was different, particles were, and the universe has just sort of evolved into what it is. And so don't let people intimidate you with their version of things. We don't have perfect understanding. God has perfect understanding. We don't. And yeah, Gene, at some point, there are things we have to take on faith. Let's start with the things that say God has a plan to bring humanity to him, and it goes to a Messiah that gives us that forgiveness, and this is the beginning of the plan. Let's take that on faith. I would not even spend any time trying to figure out what part of the flood to take on faith. I believe a flood happened. I believe that we see God's hand in this world. And I'm going to move on.
Verse 13. On the very day Noah entered the ark, along with his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and his wife, and the 3 wives of his sons, they and every kind of wild animal, livestock, crawling creature, bird, and winged creature, they came to Noah to enter the ark, 2 by 2, of every creature with the breath of life, and they entered, the male and the female of every living thing, as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut him in. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and the waters rose and lifted the ark high above the earth. So the waters continued to surge and rise greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the waters. Finally, the waters completely inundated the earth, so that all the high mountains under all the heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of 15 cubits, and every living thing that moved upon the earth perished, birds, livestock, animals, every creature that swarmed upon the earth, and all mankind. Of all that was on the dry land, everything that had the breath of life in its nostrils died, and every living thing on the face of the earth was destroyed, man and livestock, crawling creatures and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth, and only Noah and those with him in the ark remained. And the waters prevailed upon the earth for 150 days.
150 days, sorry.
So remember the word earth there, every time it's used is eretz.
Eretz, yeah.
Eretz, which means, it does mean world. It also means land and region.
I got nothing.
Okay. Genesis 8, we're going to continue. Genesis 8, 1 through 5. Okay. But But God remembered Noah and all the animals and livestock that were with him in the ark. And God sent a wind over the earth, and the water began to subside. The springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. The waters receded steadily from the earth, and after 150 days, the waters had gone down. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and the waters continued to recede until the 10th month. And on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Two things here. But God remembered Noah.
It sounds like he had forgotten him. And he goes, oh, hey, wait, I've got a guy out there floating in a boat. It's language, folks. You have to say things. Remembrance has, most often that word has to do with a covenant, of honoring a covenant. And when it says he remembered Noah, it says it's saying God kept his promise to Noah, that he observed the covenant. And this is literally referred to as the first covenant in the Bible, the Noahic covenant. And it says God remembered the covenant.
And the other thing, the mountains of Ararat.
Yeah, when I was a teen, they said they had found Noah's Ark on top of Mount Ararat. And this is another one of those things that people do, and it just makes me all crazy. Like, the Ararat is not a single mountain. And the people who told the story clearly didn't do their homework. And it gives people maybe comfort. Oh, they found the Ark, and it was on Mount Ararat.
6,000 years ago.
You notice that it says the mountains of Ararat. The people who tell these kinds of stories, like I said, they want them. They have an agenda, and they just make stuff up when they tell the stories, and it winds up squeezing out like toothpaste. The things that are wrong, and it leaves us looking like fools to people who do know, and that does damage. Anyway, the mountains of Ararat is not a single mountain. Greater Ararat is about 6,100 feet tall, if that helps anybody. But it says where they were, and that corresponds with modern day Turkey. They floated some distance. They started further that direction than most people think, but that's another story.
Verse 6, after 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven. It kept flying back and forth until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then Noah sent out a dove to see if the waters had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove found no place to rest her foot, and she returned to him in the ark, because the waters were still covering the surface of all the earth. So he reached out his hand and brought her back inside the ark. Noah waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. And behold, the dove returned to him in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf in her beak. So Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. And Noah waited 7 more days and sent out the dove again, but this time she did not return to him.
I could get into all kinds of things, that people argue about. Let's just not. Can we just?
Well, as you said, because one thing I'm like, so the olive branch grew up like that, and when
You couldn't resist, could you?
but you stipulate. But what do you stipulate? Go ahead.
God can do anything.
Yeah, there you go.
The defense rests.
Okay, verse 13. In Noah's 601st year, on the first day of the first month, the waters had dried up from the earth. So Noah removed the covering of the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was fully dry. Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife, along with your sons and their wives. Bring out all the living creatures that are with you, birds, livestock, and everything that crawls upon the earth, so that you can spread out over the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon it. So Noah came out along with his sons and his wife and his wife's and his sons' wives. Every living creature, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves upon the earth came out of the ark kind by kind. I want to make sure that we listen to that one phrase because it's going to come up later. So God, when God told Noah to get out of the ark, he says, so that you can spread out over the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No. You want to talk about it?
No, because it's going to come up with the Tower of Babel. Anything else you want to add there?
No.
When Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking every kind of clean animal and clean bird, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from his youth, and never again will I destroy all living things as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall never cease.
So, if you think that it was the entire globe covered in water, several thousand feet deep, I'm not going to argue with it. But even if it was regional, it was a very unnatural, frightening thing. I think when it talks about the Nephilim, I think that this was geared at that region, but we're never going to solve it. But what we do see is afterwards they come out and make an altar and make sacrifices to God. They remember that it's God who brought them through. And last time I made sort of an issue. Most people think that all the animals came up, only 2 of each kind. But what's known as the clean animals, the kosher animals, there were 7 pairs. Well, if there weren't, you notice they'd sacrifice from the clean animals. If it was only 2, we wouldn't have any of them, would we? There were 7 pairs of clean animals. And is it because among the clean animals are deer and their relatives? Cloven hooves chew the cud. So, there's 14 caribou and 14 nilgai and 14 sambar and is it every kind of animal on earth? It bothers me. Nonetheless, 7 pairs of clean animals says they were able to make the sacrifice and there would still be other ones to repopulate.
And they had to eat for a year. They were on that boat for a year.
I'm not even going to question that. God can do anything.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
And for the length of time, I am perfectly willing. I believe in miracles. I believe that God, but there's a purpose in them. And anyway, let's move on. I'm going to paint myself in a corner.
Chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on every living creature on the earth, every bird of the air, every creature that crawls on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. They are delivered into your hand. Everything that lives and moves shall be food for you, just as I have gave you green plants. I now give you all things.
Let's stop there.
Yes.
The appearance of this is that we were originally intended to be or given the plants and seeds to eat. That's vegetarian. The idea of him saying all creatures, we covered that in the early part of Genesis, that man has dominion. We don't use it well at times, at many times, but I don't think you can deny that man holds a place that is different than the animals. We should be better stewards. Nonetheless, man has dominion. All this does is reiterate that. The idea that he has said, no flood, I'm not going to do this again, this was a spectacular, frightening event, however widespread. Can you imagine the next time it begins to rain? What they would think. And so what you see is God giving them the assurance, this is not something I'm going to do on a regular basis, boys and girls. Don't worry about it. There was a plan here. I don't know. We can talk later about what the plan may have been. But the idea of this putting these creatures under man That's been covered in Genesis 2.
But there are people that believe that we were first God made
Made
us
us
vegetarians, and they cite this verse, everything that lives and moves on the food will be food for you, just as I gave you the green plants. So they say they gave you the green plants in Genesis 2, and it's not until Genesis 9 that we could be
I have
carnivores.
literally sat in a church and heard people argue for a solid hour that we're supposed to be vegetarians. And other people point to this and say, well, God changed all that. And they all think they have enough information to fight with each other over this. I'm just pointing it out. These are some of the things we do to each other.
So everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you all things. But you must not eat meat with its live blood still in it. And surely I will require the life of any man or beast by whose hands your lifeblood is shed. I will demand an accounting from anyone who takes the life of his fellow man. Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man his blood will be shed. For in his own image God has made mankind. But as for you, be fruitful and multiply, spread out across the earth and multiply upon it.
The lifeblood, we lived in Israel, and the beef is horrible because the way they prepare it, the kosher preparation. I mean, even McDonald's is bad. It really is. It's not to our taste. They, I'm sure, are used to it. They have all these humane killing methods that they're supposed to honor. But this, you notice, we've already had the establishment of Shabbat. The seventh day, he sanctified, he set apart. There's the beginning of that. Now we have these dietary prescriptions, if you will. It goes way back before the law. It goes way back before the Ten Commandments. And you notice that there is a special prohibition against murder. Don't take the life. We've had Cain and Abel, we've seen that, but we've also seen in the Nephilim the idea that humans have this thing within them, you know, that sometimes leads to the point of even murder. And that one thing is set apart. Since there's going to be a special punishment for that. And the idea that when someone murders another person, human, if you want to say government, may take that person's life. That goes way back. Taking another person's life is clearly serious business here.
Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, behold, I now establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth, every living thing that came out of the ark. And I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is a sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living thing with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I form clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living thing of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. And whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of every kind that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and every creature on the earth.
So you want a little confession? Of all the things in our scriptures, of all the things in our Bible that disturb me, that disturbs me the most. It reads, is this, less than perfect understanding? Maybe that's it. The way it reads is there are people who say, well, there was never a rainbow before this. I don't know what to tell you. It reads oddly. And it's God, according to this, God says, when I see the rainbow in the sky, I'll remember not to wipe you out by flood, as if God would forget if he didn't see his own rainbow. I don't know what to make of this. I just don't. And once again, in the grand scheme of things, we've got this big giant book and a whole lot of stuff. It really doesn't concern me. All I can tell you is that there is an assurance that God is not in the business of wiping out humanity. People have this image that God is sitting somewhere waiting for us to mess up so he can zap us. Look around you. Do you see that happening? You don't. Now, if there has been this flood for a purpose, I would think if I were a human, the next time it got cloudy, I would shudder. I would think, oh my gosh, have I done something? And what we see is a reassurance. That's not what went on here. That's not what's going to go on here. If you have more evidence than that, I'll listen to it, but I've been around.
And
I
just
have
from an
never found it.
educational standpoint, as you said, this theologians or religious people, or if you've grown up in the church, they talk about the covenants of God. This is the first covenant of God in the Bible, and it's called
Noahic covenant. And you know what is a good point? The idea of a covenant between God and man. We see through all of this that God keeps his covenants. Mankind seems to not hold up their end. And even when we don't, God keeps his end of it. And that's an important distinction. That's a good thing to know. This is the first time something happens in the Bible that is called a covenant, where God says, I'm making this bond with you. I will never cross that. And he keeps his word. That's an important distinction.
Okay, we're going to go to this next story, and it's weird, and now I understand it a little bit more after we've studied it. But remember, Noah has 3 sons. Oldest one is Shem, Ham is the middle son, and Japheth is the third. The sons of Noah came out of the ark. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These 3 were the sons of Noah, and from them the whole earth was
Let
populated.
me just say, if you grew up where I did, those 3 sons are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So if that's more familiar to you, it's okay.
Now Noah, a man of soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. And when he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father nakedness and told his 2 brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, placed it across their shoulders, and walking backwards, they covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his drunkenness and learned what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, shall he be on his brothers."
Now, the good news is we're getting close to chapter 12, and I told you this all begins to make more sense in chapter 12. Have you ever read this? Do you ever wonder why this story is included? Right? Ham, the son, Noah plants a vineyard, makes wine, gets drunk, and passes out naked in his tent. Ham, one of his sons, sees it and goes and calls his brothers and says, "Oh, look at this, Dad." He makes a spectacle of his own father. What most people don't
And he
understand,
doesn't do anything to fix it.
he doesn't do anything to fix it. He gossips. He does, all this stuff. What most people don't understand, we're going to be hearing about people that become all of these people we hear about in the Old Testament. The Canaanites are one of them. Canaanites follow all these pagan gods, and they are sort of notorious people. Ham is the father of the Canaanites. And this explanation is these Canaanites are lowlifes, all right? And that's what it's telling us. This is why they come out of a line that does these despicable things. That's what we're being told. So later, when you deal with Canaanites, when we read Canaanites and we see what they get up to, this part of it is to tell us, well, of course, that look who they came from. But this isn't unique. Remember Jacob and Esau? Esau's sons are the Edomites, his descendants are the Edomites. And Israel has all kind of trouble with the Edomites. And it's told because it is this animosity that started between Jacob and Esau. This is not fairy tale stuff. We saw Esau, that's horrible. But we read about Esau selling his birthright for a pot of stew. And the lesson there is that Esau was not a suitable part of the lineage of Messiah. So the birthright goes to the younger son, and it's not supposed to happen that way, but it frequently does. And it's because the lineage of Jesus, the lineage of Messiah, this side of the line between Jacob and Esau, Jacob is a suitable line for it. Esau is not. Well, in this case, what you've just read is that the father of all of the Canaanites is this guy who makes a spectacle out of his own dad. What do you expect?
And the other sons did what was right, which they took the garment, placed it across their shoulders, walking backwards. They covered their father's nakedness. They took care of business. That's what we're supposed to get from the story. The other thing I just read, and I shouldn't do this to you, when Noah awoke from his drunkenness and learned that his youngest son, and we usually think they're in order, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and it looks like Ham is in between, but here it says that Ham was the youngest son.
I'll buy that.
Okay.
That's the only record we have. I mean, we say them out of order, but I will tell you that Shem, we need to admit somebody.
Okay. I got
Okay. Shem, it's widely sort of believed that name Shem is the root. Have you ever heard Semites or anti-Semites? If you read the lineage, you'll see that Shem is in fact the top of the family tree of the Jews of Israel.
Abraham comes from that line.
He comes from that line. And so Semite, it's believed, comes from the name Shem. Shemite.
Okay. Okay.
Are we at time?
I'm going to finish chapter 9 because I like to finish the chapter. He also declared, this is Noah, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the servant of Shem. May God expand the territory of Japheth. May he dwell in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be his servant. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. So Noah lived a total of 950 years, and then he died.
End of chapter. I will tell you, one of the other things you're going to begin to see is that after this, people begin living much shorter lifetimes. And that goes to what we were told a few chapters ago, that God says their years will be more like 120. He doesn't say, on your 120th birthday, boom, you drop dead. But it says that a lifetime is going to become more like that span. And we will see that these incredible lifespans sort of fade away.
And I'll just give you a little forward thinking. Chapter 10, we're going to basically skip. It's a whole bunch of names. If I have to read them, it'll be really painful. But it is looking at these three sons of Noah and their lines, okay? And then we're going to start off in chapter 11 next time, which is the Tower of Babel, which we've heard about. Something to note, if you do read through chapter 10 and all those painful names, chapter 11 basically is a flashback. Chapter 11 happens somewhere during chapter 10. I mean, chapter 10 goes through all of these lines. So, because it'll be confusing about the languages otherwise.
There are within those generations a whole bunch of names. One of the children, one of the sons is named Sidon. And even in the New Testament, we hear about Tyre and Sidon. It's named after him. We have
Kush.
Cush, the Cushites come from there. And so we get a lot of, it's pretty dry reading all of this genealogy, but actually you see where some of these people that Israel winds up fighting with, you see their origin in these names. It's very, very common in the Middle East. Towns are named after people who do something really famous. And so the town will be named, after them. It has some interest, but probably only to me. We're not going to do that to you. It's a big genealogy in 10. Now, the thing I ask, the one ask for this week, is that you make us receptive to the fact that you lean into us. You reach out to us, that you give us these records of what you want for us, not just from, but for us. Make us receptive to that. Open our hearts as we do these studies to the incredible care you put in to leaving these records and leaving this word that shows us the way to the life more abundant, that shows that this was a plan that goes so far back to lead us to the life more abundant and help us to be the agents of that instead of getting caught up in things that are distractions. Help us to be the agents of your love, your concern, and your life more abundant to the people around us. Amen.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a good week. Anybody local that's in my book club, don't forget book club's at 4.
What?
Yay.
Have a great
Have
week,
fun with
everybody.
that
Well, so good to see
grandbaby,
you. I did
Julie and
not-
Bob.
Will
I'm
do.
jealous,
You
but
be
I'll
here
be
this
with
morning.
mine pretty
It was good to
soon.
see you.
Yeah, in a
I
couple
know,
weeks,
I'm
you
pretty-
said?
Are you excited?
Bye.
Bye. Thank y'all.